man. Not another day like last Tuesday.
Cause it's Taco Tuesday.
Tuesday, Newsday.
The big news.
Hello and welcome to Tuesday Newsday number 2 of the 2020-2021 school year. With our Tuesday Newsdays, our goal is simple. It is to determine two or more central ideas of a text and analyze their development over the course of that text, including how they interact and build on one another. At the end of today's lesson, you will be asked to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 4. 4 is sort of going above and beyond, feeling really, really good about your ability to accomplish that learning goal. And a 1 is you kind of saying, I'm uncomfortable, I need a little bit of work, I just need help when it comes to this learning goal. A 4 means that you can identify the central ideas or ideas. Point to the central idea or ideas. You can point to the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point, and you're able to identify how the ideas build on one another. A 3 means that you can identify the central idea or ideas. You can point to the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point. And a 2 means you can identify the central ideas, but you're not really getting at that evidence. And a 1 means you are unsure of how to find the central idea of the text. Now, if you're at a 1 or a 2, that's okay. In fact, I really want to know that. I want that honesty. Because it tells me what I can do better to help you understand this learning goal, right? So if you notice, 3 and 4 very closely in line with the learning goal. 2 and 1 do not. 2 and 1 are definitely missing the piece about evidence. What we do here is similar to how you've probably heard it explained in math for years. Finding that evidence, point of that evidence, is the same as showing your work. I hope this isn't a news flash to you, but school has never been about knowing the right answer. Oftentimes in assignments like this, much like in math, you can just get to the answer. And that's great, and I'm glad that you understand that, but that process is what matters most, right? Because good process, the right answer is a byproduct of good process. So having that process, just because you can get to an answer now, doesn't mean you'll be able to get to the main idea, and it may be something that's more difficult for you. But the process will kind of lead you there. So if you're able to follow the process here by pointing out the evidence is part of that process, you can definitely get to the right answer more often. And so using that evidence to help us get to the right answer is key. Process is key. This is why we do things in school and why we have these learning goals, because you're learning how to think differently. So that's why this stuff is important. It's not just that you've read, this novel or that novel, or you've done grammar work or whatever. It's about process and about how to think. School is most importantly about how to think. So before we dive into our article today, articles really, I want to kind of give you a little bit of background. The first couple Tuesday Newsdays this year are definitely going to be about events of this past summer, which were tumultuous, to say the least. A lot happened. Our society has changed a lot. And what I want to do is point out a few things about journalism and how tone and bias and those sorts of things work. And so the story that we're going to follow today actually took place on June 17th. But I think the way that it was covered is definitely worth at least analyzing or pointing out. So here's an article written on June 17th. Arbery family lawyer on Trump meeting. He doesn't feel like there's systemic racism. This is your headline. So a little bit of background here. Ahmaud Arbery was, I believe, out for a run or a walk on the street, and was about 25 years old, and I also think, and was murdered by two white men who I think thought that he looked the like someone who had committed a crime. And in the aftermath, an ensuing trial, or during that trial period, Trump met with Arbery's mother, and that's the reference here to this meeting. Here's another article title, headline, published the day before, June 16th, and actually updated June 17th, so basically the same day. Contentious or compassionate? Ahmaud Arbery's relatives, other families meet with Trump to talk police reform. So this is two that kind of suggests that Trump may have been a little bit crass in the meeting, not really so much caring about their feelings. I mean, as an African American family in the United States, um, you know, to come away from that saying, with the lawyer saying that he didn't believe that there's systemic racism in the United States. Then another article saying that these meetings were potentially contentious, and suggesting that there's not systemic racism in the United States, to a family who's just lost their son, can make things a little bit contentious. Then we have this article title, also written on June 16th. Ahmaud Arbery's mother on meeting with Trump. He was very compassionate, which definitely flies in the face of the first two articles, at least article headlines. And so now what I'd like to do is take some time to read each of these articles and kind of get some tone, kind of get some feel for what the author is trying to accomplish, and maybe the bias that's there. Now, we know that journalism is not supposed to have bias, but by nature, it's hard not to have our little bit of spin on our stories, because we're human. But at the same time, ethically, it's important for journalists to try to remain unbiased and just report the news, without their, in this case, political spin on the, or feelings on the topic. But it's important, like I said, to remain objective and do their best. And so we're going to analyze their ability to do that. So back to that first article titled Arbery Family Lawyer on Trump Meeting. He doesn't feel like there's systemic racism. Written by Elsa Chang for NPR, heard specifically on All Things Considered. Questions of how to reform law enforcement in America have dominated Washington this week. Civil rights attorney Lee Merritt has been a voice in that debate. He represents the family of Ahmaud Arbery, the 25-year-old black man who was pursued by three white men and then fatally shot while jogging in a South Georgia neighborhood in February. He is also co-counsel for the families of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Merritt was at the White House on Tuesday when he and the families of men and women who had been killed by police met with President Trump before the signing of an executive order the administration says will address issues in the policing system. Merritt also testified at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on policing in America. During the meeting with Trump, which Merritt says was difficult to accept, the president explained the executive order and Republican legislation on police reform, the attorney told NPR's All Things Considered. There was not a lot of common ground, he said. The families didn't really find too much in what he said in the executive order that would significantly change outcomes in their case, Merritt said. It was a conversation where we would exchange ideas, and he heard from the families, and the families heard from him. Here are excerpts from that interview. After the meeting, the president gave a speech before signing his executive order. Most of the speech was kind of a rousing endorsement of policing in America. What went through your mind when you listened to that speech? I have to tell you, I didn't listen to the speech. I know that what Trump's rhetoric is often about. It was a difficult meeting to take in the first place. I know he doesn't feel like there's systemic racism within our policing system. I know some of the things that we were fighting for specifically, like qualified immunity, which police officers can potentially use to shield themselves from liability in lawsuits, he had taken a position against. So the goal of the meeting really more than anything was for him to take stances like that while looking families in the face who had been killed by police misconduct without any form of justice. As far as the executive order itself, which provides funding for more training for police officers, money for departments to hire social workers, a ban on chokeholds unless an officer fears for his or her life, you don't think this executive order goes far enough? No, it doesn't go far enough, and I'm sure that the office of the presidency can go far enough. We wanted to have the conversation, and it is actually important that Senator Tim Scott, who had been drafting the Republican response to the Justice in Policing Act offered by the Democrat-controlled House, and and that he could hear these stories as well. I don't want to discount the executive order. There were some things beneficial to these families that did take place in it. A lot of the families, their loved one was suffering some sort of mental health crisis that didn't allow them to comply with the way officers expected them to, and as a result, they were shot and killed. This executive order says that maybe officers should have a co-responder system where they respond to people in mental health crises or homelessness or people who are suffering from addiction with something other than guns. And we think that is extremely helpful if it's implemented throughout the states. Our next article is titled Contentious or Compassionate? Ahmaud Arbery's relatives, other families meet with Donald Trump to talk police reform. Written by David Jackson and Nicholas Wu for the USA Today. Most updated version was the same day as the previous article on June 17th. Relatives of Ahmaud Arbery, the 25-year-old black man shot to death while jogging in Georgia, met privately with Donald Trump on Tuesday, but did not attend a subsequent event in which Trump signed an order on policing. The closed-door meeting, which also included other families, became very contentious, according to a spokesperson for an attorney representing some of the relatives. The families did not appear at a Rose Garden event minutes later in which Trump vowed to seek justice in their cases, but sidesteps concerns about systemic racism in some policing departments. Flanked by police officials, Trump used the televised address to describe the families he had met with as incredible, but he also repeated his law and order mantra that has become a central theme of his response to protests and unrest in several cities. All Americans mourn by your side. Your loved ones will not have died in vain, Trump said during an event. We are one nation, we grieve together, and we heal together. Minutes before he walked into view, Trump met with the relatives of several black men, some of whom had been killed by police. Sean King, a spokesman for an attorney representing some of the families, told USA Today that the meeting appeared to be arranged less to hear about the families that had been horribly impacted by this police violence, and more about an opportunity for Trump and Attorney General William Barr and others to highlight police unions who were there. King described the meeting as very contentious and tweeted that the families opted out of the executive order signing event. The White House declined to discuss the meeting. The meeting and Trump's order follows nationwide protests after the killing of George Floyd, a black man who died after a police officer in Minneapolis knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. Lawmakers are considering a package of law enforcement changes. Also included in the meeting was the family of Botham Jean, a 26-year-old Dallas accountant shot in 2018 at his apartment by an off-duty Dallas police officer. The family of Antoine Rose attended, according to Trump. The 17-year-old was fatally shot by East Pittsburgh police officer in 2018. King told USA Today that most of the family members in the room felt very uncomfortable because they were each sitting between police officers. The setup felt poorly conceived to those in the room, he said, since those whose loved ones were killed by police were surrounded by police, and police union leaders seemed really impervious to the stories and concerns of those in the room. King did not attend the session, but said he spoke with the participants afterwards. Jean's sister, Alicia Findlay, told USA Today later Tuesday that she did not have issues sitting between police union leaders. To her, it was like many other meetings she had attended before, where you go to this meeting and someone says, "We're going to try our best. We're going to do this." To me, I've gotten to a point where I have to see it to believe it, she said. Every family member shared their story at the beginning of the meeting, she said, and Trump, sitting in the middle of the room and rigged by 2 rows of attendants, listened and asked questions. She said it looked like Trump was responding to cues when listening to family members. She observed how the president would say to each family member as they went through their story, "We're going to have to do something about that," and would ask Barr questions about the cases. Later, Arbery's mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, told Fox News that Trump was very compassionate and very receiving of the families. On Twitter, Trump called Cooper Jones a great woman. "Her son is looking down from heaven and is very proud of his wonderful and loving mom," the president tweeted. Lee Merritt, the attorney for the families, tweeted that the news report of a photo op with the president or standing with the White House during the signing of the executive order were false. Findlay said she chose not to attend the executive order signing because she wanted to avoid the appearance of a photo op. "I was invited to tell my story, and I would go anywhere to tell my brother's story," she said. "But it's not about, turning into a photo op." Arbery, 25, was fatally shot in February while jogging a few miles from his home in a neighborhood outside Brunswick, Georgia. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation announced the arrest of Gregory and Travis McMichael last month in the case. A third man, William Roddy Bryan Jr., who filmed the shooting death, was arrested on felony murder charges, according to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Some civil rights activists questioned the need for the families meeting with Trump, fearing he might use them for political purposes. The Georgia NAACP, from Arbery's home state, took aim at Merritt in a series of tweets. One said, "To see at Merritt Law, an out-of-state lawyer who does not have deep relationships with our civil rights community, have Arbery's family appear with Donald Trump, who does not have honest intentions about saving black lives, could result in dangerous consequences for black people." Merritt dismissed the criticism. "Show me the civil rights leaders who are upset about families making a direct appeal for federal intervention after the murder of their loved one, and I'll show you a clown," he posted on social media. The police executive order that Trump signed covers 3 general areas. The order calls for a national certification system for law enforcement agencies to encourage the use of best practices for de-escalating situations that have the potential to turn violent. Officials did not detail how much certification system could be set up or might work in practice. Creation of a database to track the use of excessive force by police officers, which would allow local departments avoid hiring officers with a history of similar abuse. It would encourage police departments to embed mental health professionals with police in their response to certain calls. These co-responders could help police with cases involving drug addiction, alcohol abuse, and homelessness. Now a third article, written for The Hill by Morgan Gestalter, titled "Ahmaud Arbery's mother on the meeting with Trump, he was very compassionate," written the same day, June 17th. The mother of Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old black man, was shot and killed. Shot and killed while jogging in a Georgia neighborhood earlier this year, said President Trump was very compassionate when he met with families affected by violence and police brutality. Wanda Cooper-Jones told Fox News that the president was very receiving and listened to all of the participants during the closed-door meeting at the White House on Tuesday. "I was very, very emotional throughout the whole conference," she said. "He was very compassionate. He showed major concern for all families, not just one family, but for all families." She elaborated on the meeting in conversations with reporters on Capitol Hill, saying she didn't think Trump's executive order unveiled Tuesday was enough, but called it a start. Trump took to Twitter after the meeting and called Cooper-Jones a great woman. "Her son is looking down from heaven and is very proud of his wonderful and loving mom," the president wrote. Trump met with families before signing the order on police reform amid a broad national debate sparked by the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis police custody. Other participants in the meeting included family members of African Americans killed by police officers such as Botham Jean, Atisha Jefferson, and Cameron Lamb. Jean's sister, Alyssa Finley, told USA Today that Trump appeared to be responding to cues when listening to family members. She said the president would say, "We're going to have to do something about that," as each family was discussing their stories, then would ask Attorney General William Barr about the cases. Lee Merritt, an attorney representing the families, accompanied them to the White House before he testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on police use of force. Merritt told ABC News that tears were flowing during the heavy meeting at the White House. The lawyer said he felt the president's concern was genuine, but expressed skepticism that it would lead to reform. "I believe it was genuine concern for each of the families represented," Merritt said. He gave no indication that the families in the room reflected a problem in America. That policy could actually resolve it, and it can, so that was my concern. However, Merritt tweeted that the group secured a commitment to independent federal investigations of each of the families that accompanied me to the White House. "This commitment is not currency. This commitment does not help save lives in the future, but potentially will help get these families justice," Merritt wrote. The president's executive order was his most concrete action to date after he faced criticism for failing to address underlying causes of racial inequality and police brutality. The measure prioritizes federal funding for police departments that embrace de-escalation tactics, including a ban on chokeholds outside of instances where an officer's life is in danger, and improves the government's ability to track officers with a history of excessive force complaints. "Many of these families lost their loved ones to deadly interactions with police," Trump said in remarks. "To all the hurting families, I want you to know that all Americans mourn by your side. Your loved ones will not have died in vain. We are one nation. We grieve together, and we will heal together." Arbery's case drew widespread national attention after video emerged of his shooting death earlier this year. He was killed by two white men while jogging in Brunswick, Georgia on February 23rd. The men charged in his death, a father and son, said they believed Arbery to be a suspect in a recent string of break-ins in the area. They were not arrested until May. All right, so here we are taking a look at the worksheet for today's Tuesday Newsday. I've filled in a couple of the questions that you already filled in, that you already answered as we read the articles, and so you don't have to do that again. First of all, identifying the topic. Ahmaud Arbery was shot and killed by two white men while jogging in a neighborhood in February. That's the topic. You might also add Trump meets with his mother. Summarizing the first story listed at the right in 12 words now. And summarizing the first story listed again at the right, you should open that up in 32 words now. Now we're summarizing the second story, which is listed at the right to kind of give you a reminder. Summarize that in 12 words now. And in 32 words now. Listed at the right is article number 3. Your task is to summarize that article in 12 words now and summarize that in 32 words now. All right, moving on. From Article 1, here are the first and last sentences. Notice how we are seeing kind of the differences in the tone that it creates and how it kind of leads us to that main idea. So questions of how to reform law enforcement in America have dominated Washington this week. And we think that is extremely helpful if it is implemented throughout the states. And then the second one, relatives of Ahmaud Arbery, the 25-year-old black man shot to death while jogging in Georgia, met privately with President Donald Trump on Tuesday, but did not attend the subsequent event in which Trump signed an order on policing. And the last sentence was, these co-responders could help police with cases involving drug addiction, alcohol, and homelessness. And then for Article 3, the first sentence was, the mother of Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old black man shot and killed while jogging in a Georgia neighborhood earlier this year, said Trump was, quote-unquote, very compassionate when he met with families affected by violence and police brutality. The last sentence is, they were not arrested until May. So, based on those articles, what would you say is the main idea? What's the main idea of these? I'll make it these articles. And moving on now to respond to the quote. Article 1, here's a quote from Article 1 that says, the families really didn't find too much in what he said in the executive order that would significantly change the outcome of their case. How does this quote support the main idea that you just wrote? A quote from Article 2, later Arbery's mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, told Fox News that Trump was, quote-unquote, very compassionate and very receiving of the families. Why was this quote included in the story? And from Article 3, I believe it was a genuine concern for each of the families represented, Merritt said. Remember, Merritt is the lawyer. He gave no indication that the families in that room reflected a problem in America, that policy could actually resolve it, and it can. So that was my concern. What message does this send about the president's level of concern about the issue? It's kind of conflicting in his quote. He kind of brings up two sides. So account for both of those in your answer. And now taking a look at tone and bias. I intentionally pulled 3 articles that had differing perspectives. Which article or articles, I'll do it this way, do you think sides with President Trump, which kind of what I mean by that is like shows him in a positive light? And which articles side more with, if you believe there are 2, side more with, or like more against Donald Trump? What about the articles gave you your answers? All right, so taking a quick look at a few of the responses that you should have made, and if you wrote something similar to this, you probably got the answer correct. The main idea of the articles is that it kind of differs depending on the outlet that released the article. What remains consistent between them is that he met with Arbery's mother, along with other families of victims, or other families who were victims of police brutality, and while the families felt heard, they felt his response via his executive order did not go far enough. So again, if you had anything similar to this, you're probably on the right track. Then I will go down to the tone and bias section. I intentionally pulled 3 articles that had differing perspectives. Which article or articles do you think sides with President Trump, and which article or articles seem to side more against President Trump? The first and third articles chose more to denigrate President Trump, while the second commends him for being compassionate. And how did I know this? Well, the language in the quotes chosen to highlight in the article. It would seem, especially in the first article, that the author wants to focus more on Trump's opinion of systemic racism rather than the families affected, whereas in the second article, the authors focus more on Arbery's mother and how she perceived the meeting. So if you had answers that were similar to this, I'm not asking you to go back and change your answers or necessarily feel like you got it wrong because you didn't have exactly what I have written. If you had answers that were close to this, you're probably on the right track, and I will accept those. The last thing we have to do before we wrap up for the day is to take a look at our learning scale. All right, so here it is: a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1. Where would you rate your ability to determine the central idea of the text and analyze how that idea develops over the course of the text? If you're at a 2 or a 1, that's fine. I appreciate your honesty. Remember that this rating is more for me than it is for you, in the sense that I can do a better job explaining and highlighting quotes and talking you through why answers are the way they are if you are a 1, if you're at more of a 1 or a 2. So please answer that question now. And once you've completed your this question here, you've completed your Tuesday Newsday number 2.